Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar, How to Captivate Donors with Your Fundraising Event Program. Fall fundraising events are here, and I am sure many of you have been hard at work setting up all the logistics needed to get your event up and running. Now, no matter what type of event you have in the works, whether it's in person, virtual, or a hybrid, you're likely here because you're wondering what can you do during your event to keep your guests engaged and motivated to give? What should you present and say and when? Do you make your big ask before or after food and entertainment? How can we create additional excitement around giving? Well, our guests today will be answering all of those event program questions for you and so much more. Plus, our nonprofit guest, Keith Gehrig, will be from Mona Foundation, will share his firsthand experience creating powerful event programs that enthralled guests and brought in great results. Now, before we get started, please know that we welcome your participation and are here to answer your questions. So be sure to submit them into the questions box on the GoToWebinar control panel. We have fundraising experts standing by to answer questions both during the webinar and at the end when we will hold an open Q&A session with our presenters. Now, we hope you're going to be inspired by today's presentation, and as a quick reminder, we will be sending out the recording and slides to all our registrants afterwards. Now, today's webinar is presented by MobileCause, and MobileCause understands the ever-changing landscape of fundraising that your nonprofit must navigate while still trying to reach your goals. Now, here at MobileCause, we not only provide comprehensive online and event fundraising solutions, but also the one-on-one strategy from dedicated fundraising specialists that help simplify your efforts and maximize your results. We even provide the industry's best support team available to you 24/7. So it's there when you need it most. MobileCause has become the trusted fundraising partner for nonprofits looking to scale their fundraising quickly and efficiently without paying any transaction fees. Together, we can grow your nonprofit like never before. Now, let me introduce you to today's fundraising experts. Sarah Baker is a digital fundraising strategist with MobileCause, where she works one-on-one with nonprofits to maximize their fundraising campaign success. She creates and sets up campaigns, provides fundraising and donor engagement strategies, and creates supportive communication and promotional tools to help nonprofits reach and exceed their campaign goals. Keith Gehrig has a BA from San Jose State University, and in 2017 received his master's degree in arts leadership from Seattle University. He joined Mona Foundation in October of 2015 as the Office and Database Manager and is currently the Executive Account Manager. Keith has worked and volunteered in the nonprofit sector for the last 30 plus years and has served on boards in many capacities, starting in 1985, including one where he oversaw a $100,000 grant program. He is the current chair of the Snohomish County Arts Commission, representing District 4, and treasurer of the Washington State Community Theater Association. Now, I'm Scott Couchett. I'm the training manager at MobileCause, and today's agenda is going to be so helpful for all of you ready to rock your fall fundraising events and beyond. Sarah is going to share the pre-event essentials to set your program up for success, the 7 components of an effective fundraising event program, and we'll explore some key strategies and tools for captivating your guests and inspiring more in-event giving. And then we'll speak to Keith from Mona Foundation about how they crafted an excellent event program that garnered wonderful results. All right, now, before we begin discussing how to captivate donors with your fundraising event program, we do have a quick poll question for everybody. The question is, how do you feel about the effectiveness of your fundraising event program? So let me go ahead and launch that poll. And Sometimes it takes a second here, but it should be up there. So while it's launching, let me go ahead and read off the answers for you to choose from. Your first choice is not great. We tend to be more focused on the event planning. So-so, we've had a few good ideas. Good, but we can always improve, or confident and always ready to rock. So let's see what those answers are coming in. All right, getting some good responses. All right. Oh, these are going to be interesting results. I like this one, Sarah. So let's see if we can get a few more of you to answer. All right, looks like it's slowing down. So I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll here, and let's take a look at those results. So this really is interesting. We only have 1% confident and always ready to rock. So that's very very interesting. A little telling, I think. But otherwise we have got a good mix on the so-so and the good, and got the few of you who are not great. So you know what? No matter what your confidence level, today's webinar is going to bring you some actionable strategies and tools that you can use now or in the future. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. So join me in welcoming Sarah Baker, MobileCause digital fundraising strategist, to kick off our discussion on how to craft your perfect event program to boost giving and engagement. And you should have control. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Scott. And like Scott said, let's see if we can boost everyone's confidence by the end of the webinar. So I think something that's going to be very helpful every time you're planning your event is just to go back to the basics and kind of work through some kind of checklist to decide what you're going to do to make sure that you reach your goal. So one of the first things you're going to do with your event is decide, are you going to host a live event? Are you going to be sharing your live event via a recording? Is it going to be a combination event where you're running the event live, but some of it will be streaming via Zoom or on your event page? Of course, some of these things, like we've learned over the past year and a half or so, might change, but it's nice to have a plan in place. You'll want to identify some of the key people related to your event, so your MC, your speaker, anyone who's going to present. So of course, make a list of people who you know are willing and available for your dates, whether they can participate in person or virtually. That's the great thing about some of these hybrid events, is you might be able to bring in some new speakers that typically wouldn't be part of your event. Create an outline for your event. So start thinking through the program. Are you going to be having a dinner? Are there any performances? When are your speeches going to be? And then make sure, of course, that you schedule time out to practice all of these things. So you'll want to practice all of the speeches with all of your different speakers, and make sure you practice all of your tech elements, especially if you are hosting any kind of hybrid event or anything related to your fundraising. For example, if you're using a live fundraising thermometer, make sure that you've scheduled time to practice using that thermometer ahead of time with whoever will be running your tech the day of. So our next thing that we want to kind of dive into a little more is when you're selecting those event speakers. So who are you going to pick? So of course you want someone who is a great public speaker. If you have someone who's very passionate about your organization and about your mission, it doesn't matter if they're on your staff or if they're a volunteer, even a beneficiary, someone who is willing to talk about how your organization helped them, in their life or in a certain moment in their life. That is going to be one of the people that you'll want to consider tapping for the event. Make sure that they're comfortable speaking in front of a live crowd. Make sure that they're well informed about your organization. So if you are, for example, using a beneficiary or a volunteer, they might not have all the exact details about your nonprofit, like when you were founded or the names of some key board members. So make sure that they get that information ahead of time. One of the important things is making sure too that there's someone that's going to really connect to your nonprofit in a meaningful way to your audience. So if you are using, for example, a celebrity or a local news person, make sure that their connection to your nonprofit is going to be apparent in their storytelling so that your audience understands why they're up there and doesn't just think, oh, they just got this big name and they're paid to be here. You want them to really give off some authority with how they relate to your nonprofit. Another really important thing to think about is how you can involve any non-attendees. So this is something, again, that we've seen really emphasized over the past year and a half. So previously, when we were planning our live events, maybe we didn't think too much about people who weren't going to be at the event. Like if you buy a ticket, you get to be part of it. If you don't, you're not going to be. But over the past year and a half, many nonprofits have started to incorporate virtual elements that allow remote participation. So whether that's live streaming your event during your actual live event, or if it's recording the event for non-attendees to watch afterward, you can do a combination of these things. So anybody who can't buy a ticket to your event, or maybe they're not located near your nonprofit or where your event's being held, they can still participate. Another really great way to do this, if you aren't comfortable doing a live stream, is just sharing updates on social media. So that can be using Instagram Live, Facebook Live, just doing a post, anything that kind of gives some great information to your supporters throughout the country, just letting them know what's going on. And of course, this is a really great time to also make that donation ask to anyone who's not at your event. So that can be, just linking to your event page or linking to your donation form. It doesn't have to be a super hard ask, but just giving them a way to participate and engage. So now diving into some of the key components of your actual event program. So of course, one of the first things you're going to need to do is provide a nice warm welcome and a program overview. So for today's webinar, of course, we had Scott to provide our warm welcome and give an overview of what the webinar is going to entail. So for your event, those things would be introducing your mission. So many people might attend your event, be familiar with the name of your nonprofit, and maybe know a little bit about you, but they might not know your exact mission. So it's really great to lay that out as one of the first moments of connection for your audience to your cause. You also, of course, want to be really clear with your fundraising goals. So you're holding this event because you're trying to raise money. That doesn't need to be something that is hidden. I think it's really important to be upfront with that, and it can really help to be specific. So how much money are you specifically trying to raise, and where is that money going towards? Is that a specific program? Is there a need in your community that they're going to already be familiar with? Or are you kind of educating them on, the beneficiaries and the programs that this money will support? Again, we're not hiding that we're raising money at our fundraising event, so we want to make sure that they know all of the giving methods that are available. So if you're using text to donate, if you have giving envelopes on every table, if there's other ways to participate monetarily, like participating in a raffle, entering to win a giveaway, of course, live, silent, or online auctions. Make sure that there are instructions on how to give, including signage, having your speaker give out these instructions. Just make sure it's really obvious for people. And then of course our event, while it is about raising money, if you are having some other fun elements like dinner, let them know when they can expect that dinner, when there's going to be performances. If you are having some virtual elements, like if you're live streaming, let people know that you're going to be live streaming, if that might affect their behavior, where those cameras are, or how they can be part of your live stream if that's something they're interested in. And then of course, just like Scott did at the beginning of the webinar, introduce all the key players. So let them know who's going to be speaking and when. So if they're particularly looking forward to one of your local celebrity speakers, let them know that. And then of course, make sure you thank and shout out your event planners. So again, one of the really important things that you want to think about is how you can connect your impact to your audience. So we talk a lot about the money that we're going to be raising, the programs it's going to go towards, but always be as specific as possible. So if you have some key impact metrics like we have on the example here of how much equals what. So if you donate $50 today, that's going to purchase 4 meals for seniors in our community, for example. Demonstrating impact, of course, doesn't have to be that straightforward as well. You can also have speakers like beneficiaries come up and tell their stories. If they can't be there in person, they can be represented in video. You can show pictures, for example, of local school kids receiving backpacks that you raised earlier for back to school time. Let everyone know what your organization has been up to since your last event. If you haven't been able to hold an event in quite some time, there might be a lot to catch up on. And I'm sure your organization has gone through a lot of changes in the past year and a half throughout the pandemic. So let everyone know, bring them up to speed how things have changed. If you have new board members, new executives, maybe you've introduced a new program, make sure that your audience is getting connected to your nonprofit in a really real and tangible way. And again, this is really going to help them just understand why they should donate and kind of help add some urgency by giving them all the key facts. So Scott mentioned at the beginning, one of the things that people ask about the most is the primary asks. So this can be kind of a stressful part to plan into your organization, into your event program, is when you're going to do your primary ask and how to craft that. So the thing that's going to be the most compelling, of course, is being authentic and telling a story. This is something that we at Mobile Cause have worked on a lot. So we have a lot of fun things like our workbook that's linked here. When you get the recording of the webinar later, you can check that out. So you can start working on your storytelling. So of course, whoever is doing your primary ask, you want to make sure that there's somebody who has high energy, can make sure that this ask is going to be personal and emotional, tying in those impact metrics without necessarily being just like $5 equals this. You want them to say, this changes, this $5 that you're going to donate today will change the life of Sarah, a student in our community, by providing her with X, Y, and Z. So your ask is kind of tying back in some of those elements that we mentioned earlier, which is sharing your fundraising goal, sharing the program that it's going to. Creating a script for this will just make it easy so that your speaker, especially if there's someone who isn't necessarily part of your nonprofit, is ready to go, ready to connect to get them to make that donation in that moment. So of course that goes back to the urgency. When you are thinking about how you're going to present your ask, try to think of why people need to donate now. Of course, you know they need to donate so that you can continue to run your nonprofit all year, but why should they donate at this event versus waiting for year end? So the timing of this ask is also going to be really important. So for in-person and hybrid events, we typically recommend somewhere in the middle of the program. So you don't want to ask at the very beginning as soon as people sit down. You don't make your ask during your welcome. That doesn't mean during your welcome you don't mention the ways to give like we talked about earlier, but you're just letting them know in a more gentle way how they can give and kind of focusing on how they'll give later on. But during your main ask, you want it to be when your audience is, I like to say, the happiest. So always focus on timing that ask after they've had dinner or lunch or breakfast if you're focusing on a meal, or they've had some time to go to the bar and mingle and have some cocktails. Time your ask after you've had your most impactful speakers. So if that's a beneficiary, an executive, whoever is doing the storytelling that has kind of the high emotion in it, that's going to be before you do the ask. Even if that person is the one doing the ask, kind of arrange your speakers in that way. We also like to do the middle because you want to make sure you still have some time to mingle and have fun later on. And of course, giving them a reason to stay after you do the ask. So in a lot of the live events that I've been to previously, that can be, announcing your giveaway winners after your ask or doing the raffle, and that can be kind of tacked on to the end of your ask, reminding people of what's coming after. For in-person events, another question I get asked often is how many times to make an ask. So we like to focus on one big primary ask for an in-person event, stressing again that you still can give them the instructions on how to give a couple times during the event, but you don't want to have a bunch of big emotional asks because people who have given, they might start to feel, a little put off if you ask multiple times over and over again. Where this makes a difference is, is your virtual events only. So if you're live streaming an event and your live stream program is, 45 minutes to an hour long, you might make a couple of smaller asks during that. And that's mostly because you have people kind of popping on and off. You're not sure when they're logged in versus your in-person event where everyone's seated in the room. And if one person happens to be in the bathroom, it's not that big of a deal if they miss the ask. So with your virtual events, this can be a little bit easier to do because you can have something, at the bottom of the screen. You can switch from your camera to showing your fundraising thermometer. But again, this also ties back into your live events where you're not just saying how to donate one time, you're having one big ask, but you can have little more subtle ways to ask during the event. So that can be an update. So if you're trying to raise $20,000 and after your big ask, you're, at $19,000, that can be a time to give a nice subtle update by saying, hey, we're at $19,000. If anyone hasn't had a chance to fulfill their donation, let's get it in now. And of course, one last ask at the end of the night that's kind of smaller and gentle, just reminding people to fulfill, especially if you're using text to donate. Maybe they texted in, but they haven't had a chance to go to the form. Or even when you're using things like giving envelopes, just reminding them where they can drop those off. So something that I mentioned earlier is that text to donate fundraising thermometer. So showing your donors and your audience how easy it is to donate is going to be really helpful. So having signage for text to donate around your event space, on table tents, on your tables, having your MC maybe even walking around showing people how to text in, having volunteers maybe walking around with iPads or their own mobile device, showing people how to text in or letting them do it on that device is really great. I do like to save for my in-person events revealing the actual thermometer after you've done the ask. So if you do want to have something on screen showing your text to donate instructions, I don't usually recommend the thermometer itself, just maybe some text to donate in language with the instructions on how to do that. And then as you do your big ask and you've gotten through kind of the emotional high point, then you're going to display that thermometer. And as people are texting in, that's a great time to start getting in some of your thank yous earlier. So shouting out your donors' names as they scroll on the thermometer, celebrating not just those who gave really big donations, but anyone who's texted in at all. And again, the thermometer can work as a way for you to show that update of your goal of how close you're getting. So if you are at that 19,000 when you're trying to raise 20, that would be displaying on the thermometer, and you can have your MC or speaker point that out. And Scott, I think it'd be really great right now if we could just demo the event thermometer for anyone who hasn't seen it. So if everyone has their phone, you can definitely text in if you want to see your name pop up on the thermometer. So you're going to send a text to the number 41444. And in the message body, you're going to type the keyword, which is NPO event, all one word. And if we were donating, we text in our name, or excuse me, we text in the amount and then our name, and it'll pop up on the screen. Make sure, of course, your speaker is prepared to read the text to donate instructions in their proper order. But you can see, I think my name just popped up there real quick. So if I was your speaker, I'd say, thank you, Sarah Baker, for texting in and donating $100. We really appreciate your support today. As people text in, of course, the amount raised is going to change, where our number of donors is going to go up. And as people fulfill, of course, too, you'll be able to see that on the back end of your Mobilecause account. I'll just give everyone a minute. And awesome. So we have our nice little milestone showing one of our big donors making a donation. So that's another great thing that you can have on the thermometer. It's just kind of a fun way to keep donations coming in, especially as as things start to wind down. Those things can kind of inspire those who were just waiting around thinking about it to make their donation. Okay, thank you, Scott. So then our last thing, of course, is just kind of reminding you to have fun and make your event fun for your guests. So that means allowing it to be a social event, giving them time to eat, stand at the bar, have a cocktail, mingle with their friends, your board members, the beneficiaries. Some of these really important and meaningful conversations might happen when people aren't on stage. But also, it's just going to get your attendees in a good mood, ready to donate if they are having fun. Of course, make sure that you're recognizing everyone who does great work for your nonprofit. So that can include handing out awards and recognitions, maybe doing, a tribute video in the background of everyone who's helped your event get through the past year and a half. If you are doing a raffle and you're giving away those prizes, that can also be something that's kind of really fun and high energy. And just like we saw on the thermometer, using some fun milestones and graphics, you can make your thermometer really the centerpiece of your event with some virtual fireworks or virtual hearts, just showing your love for everyone who was able to come out to your event, whether they're attending it in person or virtually or just supporting through social media. Just giving them a nice way to say thank you and that you appreciate them. Just like I appreciate all of you guys for attending our webinar today. So over to you, Keith.
Actually, I'll take over here for a sec, Sarah. So thank you, Sarah, for sharing such a great insight into these tools and strategies that nonprofits can use to create a dynamic and effective in-event program. Now, as a quick reminder, if you have any questions, you can submit them into the question box on your control panel as we go along, and we'll be sending out the recording to attendees within the next 24 hours. So now let me introduce Keith again. So let's hear from Keith Garrick on how nonprofits, or how his nonprofit, Mona Foundation, has crafted their own captivating event program for both in-person and virtual galas. And it looks like you have control, Keith, so over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott. And Sarah, thank you. We wouldn't be where we are without all of your help and guidance. So who is Mona Foundation? Well, we're a 20-year plus, we're going on 22 years here in Bellevue, Washington. We're actually, we're named Mona Foundation after a young lady. Her name was Mona. She lived in Iran, and she was executed for her belief in education and wanting young ladies to be educated. And so we are founded in her memory and her honor, and her memory is our guidance. So our basic tenet is we believe education is the key to everything, whether it be poverty, racism, a lack of education, child marriage. Education is the key to alleviating the world's problems. As I mentioned, we've been around for 20 plus years. In 2019, we had our 20th annual gala, and we held that in Seattle at the historic Paramount Theater. But typically, in the past few years, we've held a number of events, fundraising events. We have chapters in San Diego, Seattle, Portland, and Los Angeles. Each chapter held one or two events. These were in-person events, often with a sit-down dinner or maybe hors d'oeuvres. Often at a ballroom, hotel, sometimes in a backyard. And we held these on Friday and Saturday evenings, somewhere on Sunday afternoons. They averaged 25 to about 100 people, although our Paramount event had about 600, I believe. And typically, altogether, we raised about $346,000 for the events that we did prior to 2020. And that's a net number. The gross was much higher, but then, of course, there were expenses, including food and beverages, the venue, if we had to pay for that. When COVID hit, we very quickly decided we needed to redesign this, and we went to one virtual event. We ended up holding it on Saturday morning, as we found out because we heard from many of our donors from around the world that Saturday morning was a better time for a lot of other places in the world for them to attend, including Eastern US and a lot of Europe. And that was something we had never really thought about before when we had our individual events. Because of that, we ended up having over 400 people registered for the event, and they were from all over the world. In the long run, the event ended up netting a lot more money because, well, or a significant amount of money because although it was only one event, we didn't have the venue costs, we didn't have the food cost, but we did actually spend money on getting a professional videographer, and we had an engineer who managed the whole electronic piece of cutting in the different videos. That was well worth the money. We also, this past year, decided to go with consignment items for our silent auction. That was one downside to us having just the one event, was we didn't have as much input from the chapters of them providing local items for silent auction. So our event program, we decided to have a number of short videos. We have about 15 to 19 projects that we work with around the world, and we asked them to create a video, a short video, and then our videographer went in and did the editing, professional editing, titles, subtitles. And we did this because it allowed for us to fix technical glitches. When our project was halfway around the world, their internet might not be as strong as ours. So this allowed us to have more control. We also decided to reach out to not only our partner projects, but some of our major donors and do a 30-second, 1 minute why they supported Mona Foundation. And those were done through Zoom calls that were then recorded and again given to our videographer. We were very fortunate to have Rainn Wilson from TV's The Office and for many movies. He's been a board member and a very good supporter of Mona Foundation for years. And he's a very dynamic MC. We've had him at some of the live events, and we reached out to him again to handle this online event. And of course, he agreed to. We did a fund and need like we would do in our live events, but we did that again using Mobilecause. And then we had the silent auction. And we also did something that we call Together Tables, which are a peer-to-peer program, again, using Mobilecause. But we did one thing a little bit differently with this, was that we created a custom background for each Together Table. And we reached out to donors and board members asking them to sponsor a table like we would a live event, but it was a virtual table. And each person then contributed to their campaign, was given this background that they could use on the Zoom call and show which table that they were part of. And then because Rainn is such a dynamic person, he also wanted to do some live interviews. So he did interview one of our major donors and also one of our board members. And then we also have entertainment. Mostly it was pre-recorded. We were very fortunate to have the singer Andy Grammer participate, and he recorded a song for us, and that was played through the event as well. So it was a mixture of all of these pieces. We did do our primary ask about 3/4 of the way through, so at about an hour, half an hour change into the program. And we had, as I say, a fund and need done through Mobilecause, and then also a text to donate number. And this was all available for several weeks prior, so people that couldn't attend could donate at any time they wanted. And then again, through Mobilecause, the ability to do monthly donation. And so we have been pushing that. We have actually determined that it costs $7 a month to keep one of these young children in these slum schools in India in school for a year at $7 a month. And that the way we've reached out to people specifically in that program individually and then also as part of our event. And $7 is such a attainable number for so many people. They're like, of course I can do that. And the impact is clear, and it's something for something. As I mentioned, yeah, the fund and need, we did about 3/4 of the way through. We had the silent auction open 2 weeks prior to the event, but it was going throughout, and Rainn, as our MC, would remind people that it was closing. For our upcoming event, which actually is coming up this next Sunday, shameless plug, we have 2 items that actually Rainn is going to do a live auction on. So right now they're listed as silent auction. They will go to live auction event during, and he's hoping to be able to act as an auctioneer and drive the bidding up on those events. So many of the things we learned, as I mentioned, we had decided early on in the year with COVID that we weren't going to be doing an in-person event. But prior to that, we had decided we needed to do these info sessions we needed to tell our donors what was going on at these different projects in the world, how they were dealing with COVID. And we had reached out to them, and they were live events. And we learned a lot from that. We learned about the timing that to have it at 11 in the morning on a Sunday that made it available for people all over the world. We learned about the technical difficulties of the spotty internet in some of the other countries so that's why we asked these projects to pre-record their event. We also learned about just tightening up the program and keeping it moving. And so when it came time to actually create this online virtual gala, one of the things I did personally was I started signing up for everyone that came my way. Every local organization, every arts organization, I signed up for them and I watched them and I made notes. And the notes that we found were, yes, you need to keep it moving. If you can have a dynamic MC, please do, because somebody that just really keeps the program going. Keep it to 60 minutes, honestly. Much longer than that, you lose people's focus. They get distracted. As I mentioned, we recorded as much as we could so that things went smoothly. And then, as I mentioned, we hired this engineer who was amazing and click, and he knows everything. And then we also just kept the whole thing moving. We kept it entertaining. As I said, we had musical guests. We had the auction, silent auction going on. Our MC Rain was able to pinpoint or highlight items out of that silent auction and keep that moving. And so the things that we learned coming out of this, and there's an example of our Together Table background that we gave people so that they could show that they belong to that group. It's similar to allowing them at an in-person event to share a table. This was our virtual way of showing that support. So it's important when you're doing this to have a dress rehearsal a week before, a couple days before. With our upcoming event, we've had one already. We have another one coming up this week. It's important to keep to that time. If you told people you're going to be an hour, stay to an hour. Start on time, end on time. However, we have, and we're planning on doing it again, is leaving the call, the Zoom call or whatever platform you're using, open for about 15 to 30 minutes after, so people are allowed to socialize and say hello to their friends as they would if you had an in-person event. Just because of your rehearsals and your planning, it just comes together looking like it's very polished, you're together, you know what you're doing, you're respectful of your donors and your people involved. And of course, because it was virtual, we got people that weren't able to ever come to our events. We had people on the East Coast email us or call us and say, thank you for this, because I've been giving to your organization for 18 years, but I've never been able to attend. This allowed them to be part of that. And that to us said, you know what? We need to make sure that when COVID is over, and we start going back to in-person events, that we still continue to include these people in it by having some kind of virtual event. Maybe we can live stream the event, maybe part of it, we can record it and we can put it on our website so that our donors can take part in that. And again, with the advent of Mobile Cause, thank you, and our online silent auctions, that allows people all over the world to participate too. And these are things that we want to just keep moving forward. We've learned from, and it just makes it a better event. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Keith and Sarah, for sharing your expertise with us today. I know these strategies and tools are going to help a lot of nonprofits host their own successful fundraising event, whether it's during this coming fall season or further off in the future. So we hope you're all looking forward to trying out some of these ideas in your own upcoming events. Now, okay, before we go ahead and jump into our Q&A, we do have a quick question for all of you, and that is, are you interested in learning more about MobileCause? So let me go ahead and launch that poll here. All right, should be coming up there, so we'll just give this a few seconds here. All right, getting some good responses. We'll just give it a few more. All right, looks like it's slowing down, so go ahead and close that out. All right, so let's jump into our live Q&A where we're going to answer some of the very important questions that you've sent us about your fundraising event plans. So as you're listening, please feel free to submit any others as we go along. All right, so our first question is for Sarah. And Keith, if you want to join in on here as well, that's fine. The question comes from Robin, and it is incentivizing larger donors sets up differences that, other than thanking everyone, or let me read this again. Sets up difference. Okay, incentivizing larger donors sets up difference than thanking everyone. Can you give examples of what such an incentive would be?
I'm not 100% clear I understand the question, but I do think that when you are, thanking your donors, of course, you want to incentivize those in the room who can give a lot. So sometimes I see this laid out with kind of like a fund the need. So instead of starting your primary ask with just like a general ask of everyone in the room, you kind of start out with those bigger impact metrics. So instead of starting with like the $7 a month for like Keith's example, you would start out with, $10,000 would allow us to build a one-room classroom in India, for example. So you kind of start out with those asks first, and you ask, can anyone, start off our donations today with that $10,000 to help us build a classroom, or even framing it more specifically, like we're looking for 3 $10,000 donations. And then, still keeping that pretty short. So if you don't have those donors in the room, or if you're not meeting that, kind of working your way down through your smaller needs until you kind of get to that general one that is a little more approachable to everyone in the room, which could be more of like that $7 example that Keith gave earlier.
Great, thank you.
I guess I would just add that when we do a fund the need, when we've done them in the past at live events and as well as online, that we do the larger items first. $10,000 towards building a school as opposed to the $7 to keep one kid in school. So we do start that way and then work our way down.
All right, great. That's good. So next question here is for Sarah. This one comes from Natalie. How do you manage the situations when the thermometer doesn't show a good level of donations?
I think this is definitely one of those things where preparation and planning for something like this really is key. So I always like to advise my nonprofits, have your board members, your volunteers, your event planners, people who are kind of intimately tied to your nonprofit, have them prepared also to text in to just get that thermometer going no matter what, so that there are names rolling in right away. With the text to donate, when you're initially sending that text, as everyone saw today, that's essentially a pledge. You fulfill your donation through the form. So having everyone in the room that is aware you're using the thermometer enter in their donation can be really helpful, just to make sure that the thermometer is active right away and to incentivize other people to participate as well. Something else I've done at live events too is entered in offline donations in real time. So that's an option where you have people who've donated prior to your event, maybe by cash or check, or some of your bigger, larger donors. There is the option to enter those in manually on your thermometer. So that can be done in the back end of your account. Again, just to kind of keep your thermometer rolling, keep names scrolling on there so that people see that it's working, see that it's safe by having it going already. So then you kind of avoid that issue.
Great, thank you. So next question is for Keith, and a question is, you said a virtual event should be no longer than 60 minutes. What do you recommend the best length for an in-person event?
Oh, well, that's a good question. In the past, I think our live events were probably 2 to maybe 3 hours all told, but that's including probably meals or that kind of thing. My personal feeling from events that I've been to is you still want to keep your program to about that length. You want to allow people the time to socialize before and after. You still want to hit those high points. You want to do your ask. You want to have your auction. However, if you've got a silent auction going at a live event, my suggestion is to close that a good half an hour before the event ends, so that your staff has time to total everything. But I think the live portion of the event, even with people in the room, is you still want to keep these things in mind. Keep it flowing, keep it entertaining, and make them feel like their time is important. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great answer. Next question, Keith, is for you as well, from Janet. Can you expand on the Together Table concept, how that worked?
Oh, thank you for asking that, because as Sarah was just talking about the thermometer, that made me think too. One of the things with the Together Table, again, it was a virtual aspect of something you would see at an event with a sit-down dinner, where you've reached out to board members, corporate donors, and asked them to purchase a table and have so many seats, and then they can invite their people. And those people are encouraged to donate at that table. So we just did a virtual form of that, where we reached out specifically to board members, but also to some of our major donors, and I say major donors, not necessarily the amount they give, but how engaged they are with us. And they were allowed to set a goal for their virtual table, $500 or $1,000, $10,000, and responsible for trying to meet that. And so we treated that as a pledge. So if our thermometer looked a little low, we would show the pledges on there. And so it would show that amount, banking on that person raising that. And then they reach out to their friends, or if it's a corporate donor, they reach out to their employees, same as they would an in-person table, but it's just virtual. And then using the peer-to-peer function on Mobile Cause, we set those tables up, and people can then send their specific code to their friends and say, register to be part of my table. And they do that by making a donation. And then that goes towards that pledge for the table. Then once they did that, of course, we know who they are because we have that information now. And we would actually generally ask the host of that table, we'd give them that background that we had created and say, give this out to the people that have supported your table, so that when they're there on the day of our virtual event, we can see whose table they belong to. Hopefully that explains the question.
All right, thank you. All right, so next question here is for Sarah from, I believe it's Jory. Do you have any advice for a hybrid event where some folks will be in person and a portion of the program will be simulcast to virtual attendees?
I think this kind of ties in a little bit to what Keith was just talking about, where, if you're having a live event that's like 2 or 3 hours long, but your program is shorter, the parts that your, virtual hybrid attendees won't be a part of is kind of, the dinner, the drinks, the socializing. Some of that is going to be, cut out around the edges. So the part of the program that they will be watching, and I typically recommend, recording, is that primary ask. So the virtual attendees need not be part of every single part of it. I usually like doing things too, like if you want to have like a short little recorded warm welcome, some of the stuff that you would have in person, but kind of briefer, that can be part of your event page too for people to look at if they do log on to your live event before you're actually live. Just kind of cut out some of the what I'd call fluff, but it's fun in person for those who are attending virtually.
All right, thank you, Sarah. So, and thank you, Keith, for these answers on here. I hope you got some good extra information here. So we've now come to the conclusion of our question and answer. So before we leave, if you're interested in discovering how MobileCause can help maximize your fundraising efforts, please fill out our post-webinar survey or request a demo to see MobileCause in action. Thank you again for attending today, and best of luck in planning and hosting your next successful fundraising event. Goodbye for now, and we'll see you again at next month's live webinar.